Welcome to this video in which I'm going to talk about the INSEAD Business School, which has campuses in France as well as in Singapore. So if you're looking at applying to INSEAD this year, then you've come to the right place. First, let's look at the program itself. What works for INSEAD? The one-year program, correct? It's actually a crunched, it's not even 1 year, it's more like 10, 11 months. Accelerated learning, if you are looking at a one-year program, this is definitely one of the top 3 one-year programs in the world today, correct? So, definitely a top pick for a one-year program. Second is it's truly international. If you think about it, most of the USB schools, though there is diversity, I agree that, they get 30-40% of the class from outside of the US. Predominantly, it's an American program, right? Same thing if you look at Europe. But if you look at INSEAD, the kind of diversity that you have, the kind of geographies that it covers, about 40 to 50 different nationalities every year in the program. So I think that's a huge plus. One more thing that probably works for INSEAD is the fact that it has dual campuses in France and in Singapore. So, it is possible that you take advantage of the exchange opportunity and you kind of do some courses in the other campus. So you actually get a mix of both. I think one thing, if you're looking at applying to INSEAD, is the fact that because it's such an international program, they require you to have some amount of international background. Okay, so make sure you go to the website. I'm just going to read out from the website this particular part. It says, what is the admissions criteria? Okay, and they put 4 admissions criteria. One is ability to contribute. Second is academic capacity. Third is leadership potential. Fourth is international motivation, which they describe as adaptability and flexibility in multicultural environments. So unless and until you have had an experience where you have worked so closely with people from different cultures, different geographies in your home country, right, this is going to be a little tough. So you need to have some amount of international exposure. So just keep that in mind while you're applying for the INSEAD program. So INSEAD has, 2 intakes. So we have the intake in January. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the September intake first. So for September 2018 intake, right, which kind of matches with the fall intake for most of the USB schools, you have round 1 on 20th September, which is in line with most of the R1 applications for other USB schools. You have round 2 on 29th September. You have round 3 on 24th January. And then you have round 4 on 7th of March, right? All of this, remember, is for the class starting September 2018. Again, my advice, I try to apply on the 20th September or the 29th November deadline, correct? Pushing it to January or March may be a little too late, maybe even the 24th March, January deadline, but definitely would advise against the 7th March deadline. But you also have the option of the January 2019 intake. So that is the beauty, the flexibility is you can join in September or you can join in January. If you're looking at January 2019, your round 1 would be 14th March 2018. Okay, 2nd May 2018 for round 2. Round 3 would be 20th June 2018 and round 4 would be 1st August 2018. So my suggestion, if you are not able to pick 20th September, 29th November, 24th January, instead of applying in round 4, you might want to apply in round 1 for Jan 2019. Okay, so that's the flexibility you have of the 2 start dates. Now let's look at the essays itself. So what we have over here is we have 4 job essays, and then we have what is called as motivational essays. So you have 3 motivational essays as part of it. So totally 7 essays. INSEAD application, we have seen every year, we have had students getting into INSEAD almost every year for the last many years. And one thing I can tell you is all the other schools, 1 week, 10 days, doable, but for INSEAD takes a lot more. Okay, so you need to factor in more time for your application. Let's look at the job essays. I'm going to read out and I'm going to tell you what are the things that you should keep in mind. The first job essay says briefly summarize your current or most recent job, including the nature of work, major responsibilities, and where relevant, employees under your supervision, size of budget, clients, products, and results achieved. You need to have a short answer. Now, the deal with this is it is a crunch or a summary of your overall career progression. Correct? Don't try to copy paste your CV over here. Try to be slightly more human in your approach. Try to describe it in a way that a layman can understand, because many of these essays are going to be looked by people who may not be in your industry. See, the resume that you send to prospective employers, you assume since they are in the same industry, same domain, they understand a lot of jargon, correct? For example, don't write, 10,000 LOC, right? Say 10,000 lines of code. So you need to make sure that you are explaining it in a slightly simpler word. One key thing over here is it also talks about, the results achieved. So you need to be able to quantify what you did. So it is not just what you did. Okay, so just don't go to your company portal, look at the job description for your particular title and copy paste and say, I developed, I designed, I, managed. Also talk about what was the result. So here is a simple framework that you could use: situation, action, result. You could talk about the background of the project that was given to you, what you did in the project, and what was the result of the project, right? So you could basically break it up into 3 parts. The second job essay that you have is what would be your next step in terms of position if you were to remain in the same company. Obviously, they are not just looking at the title. So don't say that I'm a manager, I'll become a senior manager, right? You need to also explain what would the senior management role entail, correct? Perhaps you need to talk about quantifying it, right? So if currently you're handling 10 accounts, as a senior manager, you will be responsible for, let's say, 50 accounts. So you need to basically quantify that. The third part, the third job essay, please give full description of your career since graduating from university. Describe your career path and the rationale behind your choices. Again, don't try to keep it in the resume format, right? So when you graduated, what were the options that you had? Why did you pick your first employer? Was there a reason for you to do that? Post that, why did you pick the second employer? Right? What was the learning that you had in the first employer? What is the learning that you had in the second employer? So you need to go gradually and take them through a journey which is your life. Correct? Again, try to be brief. Don't try to elaborate too much. Don't try to dramatize it. In fact, this is not an essay where you should bring quotes and emotions and all that into play. Keep it dry, okay, to some extent. So that's what the third job essay is going to be. One key thing over here is describe your career path and the rationale behind your choices. So you're not just telling them what you did, but you're also telling them why you did what you did. Right? Fourth one, discuss your short and long-term career aspirations with or without an MBA with INSEAD. So here the deal is we are not looking at why you want to do an MBA or things. Tell them what is it that you want to do eventually in life. If you have not been applying, still this is what I want to do. I want to be a product manager. Correct? As a product manager, I feel I'm going to be responsible for the life cycle of a product. I feel I'll be able to impact and influence the way users deal with a particular problem space. Correct? That is what they want to hear. Long term, try to be slightly more, what I would say. You can dream about your long term. It may not be as concrete as your short term, but you could say that eventually I want to be in a role where I start my company where technology is going to impact directly, let's say, a particular area where you're passionate about. Correct? You can have slight leeway in being not very specific, but don't try to pick a bizarre thing. So one mistake that people do is they are good with a short-term goal, but when it comes to the long-term goal, they say, I want to be an entrepreneur, right? You want to be an entrepreneur is too vague, right? You have to be slightly more specific, tie it back to your passion, your motivation. Now coming to so there is also an optional job essay, which is in case you are not currently working or if you plan to leave your employer more than 2 months before the program starts, please explain your activities and occupations leaving your job and start of the program. First, if you're currently unemployed, it's okay, right? You don't need to sweat it, but you need to show them how are you constructively utilizing your time. Correct. You cannot say that I quit my job and I'm preparing for the GMAT and applying to INSEAD. Correct. You need to say, oh, I'm taking these courses. I'm, kind of making sure that I'm investing in myself so that I can develop myself further professionally. Or it could be a personal reason for which you have taken the sabbatical. Whatever the reason be, put it. Make sure that you're telling them you're not sitting at home binge watching Netflix and goofing off. Right. That's what they really want to know. Also, if you have plans to quit, so one of my students who went to INSEAD this year, he actually went and took his pilot license because that was his dream right from childhood. He wanted to be a pilot, and he said, "I'm going to take this opportunity and spend 2 months, 3 months, getting my pilot license." Now, that's something that is not related to an MBA, and people don't really try to see how are you putting all these dots in this perfect linear curve which is leading towards your goal. It's okay to do things that appeal to your passion, even if it doesn't link directly to your MBA goals. But if it is, then please mention it over here. Now coming to the motivational essay, the motivation essays. So there are 3 essays. Let's start with the first one. Give a candid description of yourself, who you are as a person, stressing the personal characteristics you feel to be your strengths and weaknesses and the main factors which have influenced your personal development, giving examples when necessary. You have about 500 words for this. Now, this is a slightly complex essay, so let's kind of go through it one by one. You need to talk about 2 or 3 life incidents, hobbies, things that happened to you, things you did. But out of these 2 or 3 things that you're going to talk about, you need to be able to cull out the strengths and weaknesses that you have discovered in yourself. Correct? So the strength weaknesses cannot be isolated and your stories cannot be like different. They have to be merged together. So let me give you an example. One of my students spoke about how she grew up in a joint family, right? And she said, growing up in a joint family, one thing that I realized was I always had to share my things, correct? And initially it was very tough because, as a kid, I would want everything, but, I would get like, every time my parents would get something, they would get like 5 of it because there were like 5 other kids growing up in the same family. And she spoke about how that deeply influenced who she was today, correct? Now she spun it as a positive, correct? Now, going ahead, she spoke about this particular thing that she, gained from her father. So her father was someone who believed that, you have to go all out and give it your best. Correct. And she became at some point slightly high strung, right? It's always like, you're going to go for the kill. You always want 100% because it's not just what you're expecting from yourself, but it's something that you're expecting from others. So once she started working, she realized that, sometimes let perfection not be the enemy of getting things done. Right? So she realized that there were constraints that she had to work around, and not everything goes according to the plan. But as a human, we have to know how to deliver the maximum, not the 10 on 10. But even if I get 8 out of 10, I'm fine with it. So this was a potential weakness. She said, still I go back to the thing where I have this urge for perfection, but now I have perhaps come to terms with this fact. So you talk about a couple of strengths, you talk about, let's say, a weakness or 2, and then, you kind of weave your stories into it. At the end of the essay, what does INSEAD really want to know? It wants to know who are you as a person? What are the gifts? What are the gaps? Correct? One mistake that people do in the weakness part is they kind of mask a weakness by saying that it's a strength. For example, in the earlier case, she said perfection is my weakness. Correct? It's not something that I'm proud of. But people say, oh, I'm a perfectionist, but hey, you know what? Sometimes I just have to deal with these people who don't understand what I am. Correct? Or here is another example of incorrect weakness. I work so hard, right? I'm a hard worker. I don't know when to stop. I work for like 16 hours a day, right? And they try to showcase that as a weakness. A weakness has to be slightly more genuine, right? So that's pretty much the first essay that we have. As I said, you have to tie it together, and 500 words, 2 strengths, 1 weaknesses, 150 words to develop each story, 450 words, starting, finish, 50 more words, 500 words should be enough for that. Essay 2, describe the achievement of which you are most proud and explain why. In addition, describe a situation where you failed. How did these experiences impact your relationships with others? Comment on what you learned. 400 words for this. Very clearly, 200 words for success, 200 words for failure, 200 words for success. Talk about why you are proud of it. See, it does not need to be something that is earth shattering, but something that you personally relate with so well. Correct? Maybe it was a small thing that you did at work and that completely changed your perspective towards leadership. Because that's an important thing, right? It says, explain why. Why are you proud? It is not just the what, it is also the why. And the second part, which is when you failed, again, similar to the weakness part, here again, what people do is they say, oh, I failed, but then eventually I succeeded. No, it has to be failed. There is really no escape. You failed, it was a spectacular failure. You learned, you fell flat on your face, but you know what? I got up. I bounced back. I learned so much about life. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, there is an elite Air Force where they actually ask this question. They say, have you failed? And if respondents say they have not failed, they are actually not considered for the elite corps. The reason being, if you have not failed in your life, you don't know what failure is. And B school can be a tough place. So they want people who have very high EQ, right? So that's a huge part of the whole B school experience, which is why the second essay is about your failure, right? Not so much about what happened. It's okay, you made mistakes, everyone makes mistakes. What did you learn? How has that, look at the second part, impact your relationships with others, right? So you also need to talk about how this success and failure has changed you as a person. If you have not thought about it, good time to think about it. Because as I said, EQ is a quality that INSEAD looks for in their applicants. Then you have the last one. Describe all types of extra professional activities in which you have been or are still involved for a significant amount of time. Now, this could include sports, clubs, music, arts, politics. How are you enriched by these activities? Now, one of the things, and this is 300 words, one of the things that INSEAD or any B school looks for is leadership qualities. Now, what do you mean by leadership? Leadership is when a person says, my life is not just going to work, coming back home, watching TV, going to sleep. I am passionate about certain things, correct? And a leader typically will have one more thing that he is kind of going to pursue on the side, right? So you need to pick what it is, you need to quantify it, but more than the what, again, I will tell you this, it is the why. Right? Why is that cause so dear to you? Why did you not pick something else? Why did you pick that sport? Why do you jam with your band every weekend? What about music inspires you? What can other people learn from you? Correct? So this is where and 300 words is plenty of space for you to elaborate on that part. And then there is the usual optional essay. Optional essay, as I've maintained, is if you have any gaps in your education, in your experience, optional essay is the place where you need to address. Or if there is something that you feel the admission committee needs to know, not something that you're trying to retrofit, a story which doesn't fit anywhere else. And you say, hey, you know what? I'm still left with this story. Let me just plug it in. Don't do that. You're better off not writing it than writing something stupid. So I know there is a lot for the INSEAD essays. In case you are applying this year, in case you think there is any way in which we can work together and we can provide you with the help, please let us know. You can click on the link below and let us know. As always, like and subscribe to our videos. We have MBA analysis for most of the top B schools, and please comment below. I would like to personally respond to each and every query that you have. Thank you.